certified planners. She received a master's degree in city planning from the Resource Management concentration from the University of Pennsylvania, and a BA in government from Cornell. In her free time, Stephanie was spending time with family, reading, gardening, hiking, and doing crossword puzzles. We also have Patrick Bowen, who joined the Arboretum in October of 24. He came here from the University of Central Florida, where he was Director of Landscape and Natural Resources and Arboretum, and a professor of biology. Prior to working at UCF, he directed the agroecology program at Archbold Biological Station in South Central Florida. A native of Ohio, he holds degrees from the University of Michigan, Miami University, and Ohio State. We'll forgive you for that. He is honored to lead a phenomenal program that unites his diverse interests and builds on his experience in ecological research, education, and land care. All right, so I'm going to let each of them also provide a short introduction and presentation, and we'll then open it up to a panel discussion. So
Reduce Roslyn first. Thank you so much for that introduction, Diego, and for the opportunity to be here with you all today. I'm really excited to tell you about 350 Wisconsin, an organization that's really near and dear to my heart. So just a little bit of background on who we are. We're an independent affiliate of the global movement 350.org that was founded by Bill McKibben. We are the largest Wisconsin-based grassroots climate justice group, and we are independent from 350. We share a lot of the same values and work on campaigns together, set our own agenda, we do our own fundraising. And we use a spectrum of strategies from policy advocacy to direct action, which we find really brings a lot of people increasingly into our organization. There's really a place for everyone. We were founded in 2012 as 350 Madison, and we became 350 Wisconsin in 2022, recognizing our growth and increasingly the work we've been doing on policy statewide, as well as resisting fossil fuel infrastructure statewide. In that same year, we founded 350 Wisconsin Action, which is our sister organization that is able to do political work. We realized that a lot of what we were able to accomplish was really dependent on who's in office. So I can tell you a little bit more about 350 Wisconsin Action kind of at the end. But we find that the two organizations work really well together. So I think our mission really sums up who we are, so I'm just going to take a moment to read it. We mobilize grassroots power to change hearts and minds, laws and policies, and humanity's massive systems to make transformational progress toward environmental justice and solving the climate crisis by 2030. So we're all about collective action, so speaking to your point, Diego. And we have a set of core principles for change that guide our work. And we have found, even in today's unprecedented times, that these ideals continue to be essential for bringing about change. So we are a grassroots organization. We seek to create and have created, I think, a multi-generational, multiracial, people-powered organization that is welcoming and brings people in regardless of their background, their skills, and we really have a lot of volunteer mojo. Volunteers really are essential to everything that we do. We couldn't do it without our volunteers. Climate justice is central to all of our campaigns and all of our work. We acknowledge that those who have done least to cause the climate crisis are experiencing the impacts first and worst. So we really seek to align with climate justice organizations, to listen, and to put those concerns and needs really at the forefront of our work. We also are really dedicated to collaboration. We're members of lots of different coalitions at the local, state, regional, national level, and we find that we're much more effective effective when we build trust and relationships and work together. We focus our work on respecting natural systems. We know that prioritizing ecosystems and considering the impacts on all life is really integral to solving the climate crisis. We advocate for solutions that draw from both science and cultural knowledge and wisdom of Indigenous and other communities. And then finally, visionary thinking. We know we have to think out of the box. We really need to transform so many of our systems and challenge long-held beliefs. So, as I said, volunteers are critical to our work. They do everything from lead our teams, research, social media, communications, tech support, you name it. But our volunteer leaders are really so important to carrying out our campaigns, implementing our programs, and helping with public education. So we really have grown in the last few years, just more people coming in with a diverse set of interests. And so we have 7 campaign or issue-based teams: Line 5 pipeline resistance, community climate solutions, utility energy justice, and more. And then we have 3 operational teams. We have monthly meetings that are open to the public. They're mostly on Zoom the first Monday of the month. We bring in a lot of outside speakers, so those are very popular. Sometimes we have as many as 100 people on Zoom with us. So I'm going to just take a few minutes to talk about a few of the campaigns, not get into detail on all of them, but to give you like a flavor for our work. One of the things that really distinguishes 350 Wisconsin is our use of creativity in our art and activism. And we do that to bring hope, joy, and fun into our work because we are thinking about a really difficult issue all the time. And a lot of us are experiencing anxiety and concern and don't know what to do. And more people have joined our art collective. Folks who do not have a fine arts degree but will help with art builds, who want to dance with us, make a banner or a kite. And it's a really great space. And we find that it really activates the public and motivates leaders to take action. And they're intentionally colorful, attention-grabbing, and mediagenic. So often, it's those actions that we do on the Capitol Square or at the farmers market that gets us that interest from the media. We use art, music, humor, dance. We have a choreographer as one of the team leads. She's amazing. And so we have, we do flash mobs and all kinds of, interesting, fun, satirical types of activities. These are just a few photos from some of that. So on the top left is our Walking on Sunshine flash mob. You can see they're dancing with solar panels. We were protesting the efforts by MGE and Alliant to roll back solar and metering, which is really critical to ensuring that we have rooftop solar in our state. You can see our river, and those are people with critter hats in the river who are highlighting the need to protect our water from fossil fuels and oil pipelines. And then down in the bottom right is our Chariot of the Great Turning, playing off of Joanna Macy's thinking about how we need to turn from an industrial, polluting, extractive economy to one that's sustainable and regenerative for everyone. So talking a little bit more about our Line 5 oil pipeline resistance, we were invited by the Bad River Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa to join this campaign in 2020 based on our history of resisting Enbridge pipelines and our success throughout the state. And so we have been doing community organizing, working with allies to highlight the negative effects, really critical need to stop this pipeline, which currently is on the Bad River Band Reservation. Their lease had expired, they've been determined to be trespassing, and now they want to build a 45-mile reroute of the pipeline around the reservation upstream, which will go through even more waterways and would be devastating if there was an oil spill. And they have a track record of oil spills. So I could go on, and I'm happy to talk with anyone about that campaign. But it's really come to a head, and we filed a lawsuit in December after the Wisconsin DNR granted permits to Enbridge for the pipeline reroute to impact wetlands and waterways. So we're in the middle of that lawsuit right now. Our utility and energy justice team really works, has a goal of 100% clean, affordable, reliable energy for all. We use a variety of strategies, but in the last couple of years, we've actually been formally intervening at the Wisconsin Public Service Commission. But we're also working more broadly to try to demystify the Public Service Commission processes and really increase public participation statewide. So we're bringing attention to the connection between these monopoly utilities and fossil fuel industry. And currently, in addition to pipelines, we're fighting methane gas plants. There are about 7 proposals around the state, billions of dollars in investment that are likely to be stranded assets in a few years. And they're sited in communities that are already sacrifice zones, that are experiencing air quality and health impacts, and just extending the use of fossil fuels into the futures that we think is a big mistake right now. Our Community Climate Solutions team is our most locally based team. It promotes sustainable practices and policies for energy use, buildings, transportation, and more. And those folks engage with community leaders, businesses, school districts. And we have working groups currently in Fitchburg, Madison, Middleton, and focused on UW-Madison. We've had a lot of successes. We mobilize our folks to contact their alders and speak up at local hearings. So the passage of the accessory dwelling unit ordinance was, I think, the most recent thing that we took action on. It's really important for affordable housing, for reducing transportation emissions, and just having healthier communities. We also have been working for many years to get a building energy savings program passed, which it did a couple of years ago, which really puts more of the onus on commercial building owners to track their energy usage, and it's been shown to really have an impact on that. So, so that's kind of a summary of some of our most active campaigns. And then I just wanted to say a couple of words about 350 Wisconsin Action. As I mentioned, it's our sister organization, so we're able to really speak about candidates and their positions on climate in a way that we can't do as a C3. We also do advocacy, we endorse candidates, and then we work to get climate champions elected. We've been doing that since the 2022 midterms. Our strategies include, we reach out to voters via canvassing, door knocking, phones, relational texting, and we've been really active on college campuses. Just in the fall election, we were organizing on 7 campuses throughout the state, and we're continuing to work to uplift student leaders and increase civic engagement on campuses. So I'm also happy to answer anything about that. And just want to say, we'd love to have you join us. Feel free to contact me or our volunteer coordinator. We have some information over there on the bench. Encourage you to check out our website, 350wisconsin.org. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone, it's good to be here. Like I said, my name is Madeleine, and I'm sort of part of a lot of different climate organizations, so I'm going to go into a little bit about some of those. But the way Bob found me here was that I'm a junior over at West High School, and I'm one of the co-presidents of our school's Green Club. So our Green Club kind of does a lot of different projects. We're politically involved. We have some of our biggest projects have been like waste reduction. So last year we had composting bins that Green Club members would walk around the school and make sure that everyone, like students, were composting the food at the end of lunch instead of sending it to landfills. We've also done an annual electronic waste drive, which has been super successful. So we collect electronic waste from around the community, around like Madison, and then we send them off to Goodwill and are able to process it. And so they salvage the things that still work and send them to a new home. And then things that can't be, they just recycle those parts. So again, avoiding the landfill. Politically, we've done a lot of efforts for canvassing for candidates who are going to support the environment and like a healthier future. I would say, yeah, those are kind of the big projects we've worked on this year so far. I'm also part of the Citizens Climate Lobby, or CCL, Madison chapter, and then we have a specific youth group that I help lead. And so our big thing is an annual trip to Washington, D.C., where we do lobbying. It's a huge lobby day. We have a bunch of CCL members all on the Hill, and you actually get to meet one-on-one with members of Congress and talk to them. So I wasn't able to go last year. I'm hoping to go this year, but that's what we're ramping up for right now. And then we also do a lot of presentations just around the community. CCL has 4 main policy asks, and they change each time that we meet one of them. So I don't remember all of them off the top of my head, but I know there's carbon pricing dividends is one of the things we're really big about. We also focus a lot on building electrification. So again, a wide variety of projects. And then another of the organizations that I help out with is the Dane County Youth Environmental Committee, or DCYC. And so their main thing is we have this annual conference over the past couple of years. It's been at Madison College, MADC. And so we draw, last year it was over 200 people. We're expecting even higher attendance this year in the fall. From high school students from all over Dane County, and we actually have some people from outside of the county as well who drive all the way in. And so we have a huge table in there. I think 350 Wisconsin was there this past November actually. But yeah, it's a great way for high schoolers to connect with other green teams and other people who are passionate about the climate, and sort of get the ball rolling with some ideas for future projects. And so, yeah, I was one of, this past year, I helped moderate that, and I was one of the main planners for that conference. And I'm helping out with that again this year. Let's see, what else?
When did you go to school?
I do go to school. I'm in AP chemistry this year, which has been really interesting because we kind of look into some of the environmental connections there.
There's one organization that I feel like I'm forgetting.
It's on your list.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. I was going to segue into, so last year for the Dane County Youth Environmental Conference, we had a guy who drove all the way from Indiana actually, and he runs it's called the Youth Environmental Press Team. And so he invited me to join them first as an editor, just writing articles maybe once a month. But I'm also now a director on the Youth Environmental Press Team. So it's Indiana-based, but we're trying to expand our reach to a bunch of different states. And essentially it's it's primarily online, but we have, I think once a year we print out some of the top articles into a physical booklet. But yeah, it's the topics that we write about are kind of very varied. As the name suggests, it's youth write all of our articles. So it's mostly middle schoolers and high schoolers, and we have a few interns who are in college. But writing about their personal experience with climate change, or sometimes they'll do like a research paper and publish kind of the science behind a specific aspect of the climate crisis. And I wrote, for example, an article about Christmas trees and kind of what we do with them after the holiday season ends. So yeah, that's been a lot of fun. Serving as a director on the Youth Environmental Press Team board. And then the last thing I guess I wanted to touch on was I also work for MMoCA, the Madison Museum of Contemporary Art, and recently we curated an exhibit called Green Over Gray, and that focuses on sort of how humans are adapting to climate change and how we need to do something. The other people are not going to do it for us. And so it was curated by myself and a group of other high schoolers, and then we were also curating from pieces that were submitted by high schoolers who live in Dane County. So, yeah.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's an honor to be up here with such impressive panelists. 350's been one of the longest standing climate activist organizations, advocacy organizations. They just do fantastic work. And Madeleine does, as a high schooler, just accomplishing amazing things. what I was doing. You don't want to hear what I was doing when I was in junior high school. I'm not directly involved in climate science. I was an academic for 20 years, so I'm still in an academic position. But I do feel like I know a lot about climate change, and in part because of my work as an ecologist, you really can't understand natural systems anymore. You can understand how they're going to be impacted or are being impacted by climate change. So therefore, you kind of have to do your homework on climate change, so you have a scientific understanding of that. And I also have to teach climate change to undergraduates, so you have to learn a lot about the subject to teach it, especially when you're teaching 250 undergraduates, none of whom are science majors. So I've really been a student of climate change and energy climate change for 30, 40 years. I feel like I'm fairly knowledgeable, but I'm not a climate scientist by any means. And I haven't really done a lot of work in climate change per se, but because of that background, I think it's important for people to have kind of common understanding of some of the global aspects of it. Because when we know our local actions, we have to have that understanding global. My mother always used to say, what's that famous 60s expression? Think global, act local. We all know it. So I've always just lived that way, and that's something I think we all have to accept, that we have to put our local actions, what we're going to do tomorrow, in context, in part to know, hey, is this really going to make a difference on the one hand? And the other hand is, how does it fit into what's happening? So I think we can start from the premise, and I think we all know that climate change is inextricably bound to energy. It's about how humans use energy to fuel economic activity. That's why we have climate change. And it's primarily due, as we know, to fossil fuel. And we build an entire global economy on the consumption of fossil fuel. If you track economic activity on a graph relative to fossil fuel consumption, you'll see there's a very tight fit between fossil fuel consumption at the global level and economic activity. And that's because most of our economic activities require burning fossil fuel. So our biggest effort then, and I think our most important one, is to think of alternatives for burning fossil fuel. Drive through Iowa, drive through Illinois, you're going to see a lot of windmills. Drive around here, you see a lot of solar panels. You don't have as much sun as I have in Florida, which I could actually power my house on solar, but you still see a lot of renewable energy. We clearly have to shift to renewable energy so everybody can be involved in that process. But we also have to recognize, and this will get back to something I'll come back to a little bit later, is we cannot support the level of economic activity that we have on the earth today with renewable energy. Not now, not 20 years from now, not 50 years from now. It's physically and thermodynamically impossible to do that. Fossil fuel's cheap, it's easy to get, it's portable, that's why it can fuel our economy. All of our renewable energies are what we call poor quality energies. You have to use them on the site that you generate them, they're not very portable, so it's a completely different thing, and they're limited by, in the case of sun, how much sun is shining and where, in the case of wind, how much wind is blowing and where. So I think that's important for us to realize, because that means, well, if that's true, then how can we have economic activity? And that's a very good question. Not have climate change, and I think that's a very good question we should all ask ourselves. And at least in our current condition, I think that also means the best way for us to reduce energy consumption is to reduce consumption. So we really have to face a world where we're consuming less if we're going to really be serious about reducing climate change. And we can all do that. We can all do that. You don't have to buy now on Amazon twice a week. You can choose a different option. There's a lot we can do to reduce consumption. I think that's important. The other thing I think is important to remember is there's a lot of climate change that's baked in. I hate to use that phrase, but there's a lot of climate change that's baked in. Why is 350 named 350? Anybody? Without panelists.
It was the target.
It was the target. Where are we now?
400.
420. 420. We're over 420. When I was a postdoctoral researcher in 1996, I was measuring soil respiration. We had to know the background level of CO2 in 1995. It was 260. 260. So we know, based on what we've known since the 19th century, that level of CO2, no matter what we do, is going to generate centuries-long climate change. And none of the targets that they've established at the international level are being met, and they haven't been met. I've been setting them for over 10 years. Targets in energy production, energy consumption, targets in CO2 output. So we have to set ambitious goals. We have to talk about 30-30, we have to talk about 30-50. We also have to be realistic about how much CO2 is going to be in the atmosphere 20 years from now. And accept that we're going to have to adapt to climate change. The Wisconsin analysis that I looked at recently, for example, have you ever seen those maps where they show what's your city going to be like in 50 years due to climate change? Have you seen those? And compared to like where you are to where I was in Florida. By the way, I was in Florida for 26 years. You have nothing to worry about in Wisconsin when it comes to climate change. And I say that, but of course you were breathing smoke from Canada last year. So you guys are affected as well. But if you look at the maps, the other point I want to make is this is not we're all going to be affected equally kind of thing, right? And we are blessed, and I say we now, I've only been here since October, but I'm a Wisconsinite now. We're blessed in Wisconsin not to be at a location that's going to have severe climate impacts. In the United States, that would be the southwestern United States, the western United States, think wildfire and drought, we got lots of water here. And then Florida, and places like that are a lot of coastline, there's going to be sea level rise, and you're susceptible to severe storms. But that being said, we're still affected. At your local level, I think the thing that's been happening here that you've experienced that I haven't experienced, but it's really kind of nice for me having come here from Florida, is your winters are milder. I like that. And but you're having more extremes, and so are they having more extremes every single square foot of the planet. More severe rainstorms, more extended droughts, more unpredictability. Locally, I know it's created a lot of flooding. So one of the issues I think the Madison community has to deal with is extreme rain and flooding events. And since you are in a community, which I know this summer is going to have some construction going on, because all of our stormwater infrastructure, which is so important how we live in a developed society like this, is where does the stormwater go when it rains? And you know where it goes if you live down off next to the Arboretum. Sometimes it goes over the road. So there's a lot of emphasis on rebuilding stormwater infrastructure, which will be very expensive but needs to be done. And I'm glad some of you may know this summer they're going to put a new pipe across the road down there, across from the Arboretum, to get ready for further transformations that they're going to do in the stormwater infrastructure so they can handle more water in the system. So that's one thing that's happening. More water also means your ecosystems are going to change, your lakes are going to change. A lot of changes happening there due to that. And last year you had extreme rainfall and then a drought. Those kinds of patterns are just going to happen more and more. As you move in the future, you just kind of have to be ready to adapt to them. The other thing I think we all recognize is that the effects of climate change are not going to be distributed equally. This is a question I asked in my undergraduate class. I had like multiple choice questions you ask before class gets taught. Like, hey, what do you know? So one of the things was multiple choice, and the one they selected was correct. People in poor countries are going to be a lot more affected than people in rich countries by climate change. And we're in the richest country in the world. Again, once we're blessed once again, and we're in Wisconsin, and we're in the richest country in the world. So from a climate change perspective, that's not bad. Almost all the students got that right. That's the one they selected. When I asked the people in America, poor people will be affected more than rich people. That's not the one they selected. They thought in America we're going to take care of our own, but we all know that in this country the poor people are going to be affected more because they are more susceptible to heat island effects during severe heat, especially in warm climates or even in northern cities where they live in the middle of urban heat island effect. So really have to think about communities that are going to be most impacted and what we can do to help them, because that's a social justice issue that I think we all have to face. From the perspective of like what we do with the Arboretum, again, we are a long-term center. We have data. We've been measuring when certain flowers bloom during the year since 1938 or whatever, since the 40s. So we have long-term data, and being a long-term site, we can really kind of demonstrate the response of our local ecosystems to the changing climate. Curtis Prairie, which is our the first restored prairie, as you may know, in the world, restored in the 30s and 40s. In the past 15 years has experienced a shift in the distribution of the species. Still very diverse, very nice prairie, but it's showing signs of a wetter prairie because we're getting more rainfall, and we can see that in the ecosystem. The other thing that means with the warming temperatures and more rainfalls, the systems are going to change. They're not going to be static. So if you're trying to preserve or conserve, you just have to look forward and think, well, what kind of ecosystem do we think is going to be here in 20 years? We need to start planning for that. It's not a static system, right? That could affect things like invasive species. We're going to see some invasive species coming in from Illinois that we don't have now. We're also going to see wonderful native species that are going to move farther north because of the range shift that's going to take place. Coming back to that comparison of city to city, what I looked at the other day said that Madison's going to be like Tulsa, Oklahoma in 60 years. So that's just, maybe not, but that's what the projection is if we go on this line. So just wrap your head around that. It's changed a lot in 10 years. You've all seen it if you lived, who's lived here a long time? You've seen the winters change. People complain about lack of snow and it doesn't stay as cold as long. We get to cross-country ski this year. So, you've seen that, and we're going to be on that trajectory. So there's a lot of planning, I think, really around just how are these systems going to change from an ecological standpoint, what kinds of invasives are we going to be prepared for, are there things we can do to preserve and to conserve systems that are changing like that, and what does that mean? How does the water system affect everything? Those are the things we can plan for, but as far as actions, the Arboretum is more in a position of demonstrating the effects and trying to deal with them in terms of our work. Fire is very important. We need to continue to burn our ecosystems if we want to maintain the preservation of the biodiversity. I don't think that will change in the next 100, 200 years, given the long-term history of the systems here. But we might have to rethink fire, climate change, when we do it, what time of year, whether it's riskier under certain circumstances, if it gets hotter and drier, and those kinds of things. So that's really kind of what I have to say. I guess we'll turn it over to the audience, and folks who have questions, hopefully the distinguished panel here can help foster that discussion.
Great, thanks. We'll open it up for questions now, which I certainly have some if other people don't.
I always have questions.
Yeah.
One of the things I always ask is, what gives you hope? Because I think, in some ways, all of this is a little bit hopeless sounding, and what will help us to maintain our hope and keep working at it. And the other thing is, if you were in charge of the world, what one thing would you most want for people to do?
I'll take a quick step so I can not be first to be done with it. What gives me hope is the number of the knowledge that we have about the world. That we understand this thing very well. The number of people locally, regionally, statewide, nationally, globally that are concerned about this issue, that are working on this issue, the amount of economic change we've already seen towards different energy systems, all of that. Young people that are coming forward, prepared to embrace this change because they know it's coming and there's nothing they can do about it. So I have a lot of hope in that regard. And again, if I could do one thing, I'd find a way to have a pleasant and supportive economy that had less consumption involved in it.
And monetary spending.
Yeah, you can't consume this much and have to protect and keep the good environment and a world that's good for all of us into the future. I don't know how I do that, by the way. If I could, that would be the thing.
I think the thing that gives me hope is that people are really willing to listen. So a lot of the time, we go through our daily lives kind of ignoring climate change, but when I bring up climate change and I talk to individuals about it, they listen and they're willing to do something about it, and I think that's really powerful. And then to your second question, Bonnie, I think power is inherently corrupted. I think I would reject that power. But I guess before I did that, maybe I would delegate, like assign people specific tasks regarding saving the world. Yeah.
Those are good questions. I guess if I could wave a magic wand, I would really like to see clean energy and efficiency available to everyone. I know the IRA was intended to do that, but it's still inadequate in its state. It's a little unclear. But when I think about the folks who are energy insecure, who have to make choices about what food they put on their table or whether they can keep the lights on, I think there's so much that we could do by upgrading existing homes, maintaining them properly, making sure everyone has access to energy efficient appliances and solar on the roofs. That would be something if I could, snap my fingers and think that we all need to work towards that. In terms of what gives me hope, I was just thinking today about, the Yale Center on Climate Communications is a great resource. And, they tell us that even in Wisconsin, 60% of the people think global warming is happening and affecting people, but only like 30% of people ever talk about climate change. So being with a group like this that wants to talk about climate change, is willing to, and we're having more conversations, that gives me hope. And seeing people who want to know what they can do and how they can step up. And then I think even in these sort of dark times we're in, the display of agency and collective action that we saw yesterday, I think that gives me hope. And hopefully that will translate into more action and standing up for what we need on climate change. Because as Patrick pointed out, that it is a dire situation. We need to be acting now.
All right, Lisa.
Thanks for giving some, I like your thought about overconsumption. That's one thing we can all stop doing, and that's the purpose of this panel, is the local changes we can make. And in the spirit of that, I want to put on my other hat, which is I'm a board member of the Friends of Lake Wingra, and the chloride levels in the lake are rising very quickly, despite the fact that the city of Madison has really reduced their salt use on the streets. So everyone, if you see anyone put salt on their sidewalk or their walkway that's excessive, stop them. It's pretty bad, and it keeps getting worse, and I'm sure Patrick knows that these chloride levels of coming out of the springs in the Arboretum are very high. Like, you cannot drink it anymore. It's deep in our aquifer. So that's one thing everyone in our neighborhood would do, would actually have a direct impact on our lake. And it's the species it supports, aquatic plants and animals. I'm done.
Sorry, you're just tapering up.
I had more to say, but I got it.
Oh, you want to continue?
No.
I don't know if you guys want to respond to that. I guess I'll ask a question here. So I work for a nuclear energy company, and I think this is one area where I've been happy to see some environmental groups kind of shift their opinion on in support of nuclear energy. So as Patrick talks about, I'm glad that you kind of talk about like the thermodynamic realities of just relying on solar and wind. And it's interesting, so where we're first trying to build is in Idaho, and we've engaged with the tribes there, and we've heard from them that they want to see some of the dams, which normally we would think is a very green and environmentally friendly source of energy, but they would like to see those removed, and they'd like to find ways to have an alternative source of energy that's less impactful to their cultural sites. So So I guess I would be curious to hear what you all think about that. I feel like I don't hear quite enough about that from some environmental organizations, and obviously I have a very personal stake in this.
Yeah, that's always a tough one. I always feel like it's a little bit of a, sometimes comes not from you, but like a little bit of a gotcha. We don't have a position on nuclear energy. We do worry a lot about the safety. You know, we hear that it's improving, but we worry about human error, especially when we see how our current government's mishandling so many things related to security. And we think it's really important to focus on the things that we can do now that are clean and safe, and that we have not nearly tapped the potential for in terms of sun and wind. So that is more of our focus, just to be really upfront.
I just wanted to add on to that. I think that's a good perspective that it's definitely very important to look towards solutions that are going to help us down the line, but also we need to mitigate the effects of the damage already being done right now, because it's not enough to stop future harm. We need to actively be reversing the harm that we've already done to the planet. It's a very specific scenario, and I don't know that much about Idaho, so I can't speak to specifically what is like right there, but I would also say that indigenous groups have maintained the land for thousands and thousands of years before we came and very quickly interrupted ecosystems. So there is a lot of knowledge that has been passed down there that I think it would be wise to at least listen to, if not act on.
Yes, I think that, I don't have a position on in favor or out of favor of nuclear. I think nuclear has real potential as a carbon generating or lower carbon generating source of energy. So I know there's a lot of, there's division among environmentalists about whether it generates or not. The reality, I think, on the one hand is there's been a lot of, as you probably know, Westinghouse, another one, there's a big one in Florida we're going to build, 700 million, I can't remember the cost overrun, and it's shut down, I can't remember the name of it. So there's not a lot of success right now building new nuclear, and I just saw this week actually, it's funny you should bring that up, this idea of the small nuclear plants. They were planning on rejuvenating something in Michigan, it's going to be a political controversy with environmentalists, using these smaller nuclear units that they're not as risky as far as their operation, apparently. They do still generate the nuclear waste, and of course, as you know, the nuclear waste problem isn't solved. So you generate the nuclear waste, you gotta store it, and we don't have a long-term solution to that, and it can be radioactive for a very, very long time. But I'm neutral on it kind of, but I think this idea of small nuclear power plants is kind of a keel in some ways. But if it can be solved from a technical standpoint, especially from a safety perspective.
Okay, Bob?
Well, I wanted to give a little bit different opinion or perspective. For many years, been a member of Physicians for Social Responsibility, and we see things, I think, quite differently than you do. We think about 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, Fukushima, and all the health fallout from the nuclear bombs that we have used, and the threats that seem to be around as far as military sorts of moves, and now in Ukraine, that's right in our face also. And in that respect, I think we could talk a lot about debating this, but I'm wondering from Patrick whether this is being looked at by by universities, as to trying to weigh where we should be going with this, because I think it is a big issue. And I'm wondering what is being taught at the UW. I know that the nuclear engineering group at the university is very pro-nuclear energy use. But I've heard from them the 40 years that I've been in town that, we're going to come up with a way of disposing of haven't done that yet. And the whole issue of nuclear has a lot of mines and pitfalls on it.
And nobody will insure it.
Yeah.
I have to plead ignorance on, where UW stands on that city
Learn.
area, so. but,
Isn't that a thing that the university should be looking at and should be? We should
Sure, it's
be
inundated.
asking them to do?
Among people who have those interests and expertise, but.
Hmm.
Anybody else?
I guess I feel like I have to kind of respond here. So people do talk about nuclear waste, and interestingly, it's actually not a technological problem. So France gets 85% of their energy from nuclear power, and they most of what's actually what we would call nuclear waste, you can separate out the stuff that is highly radioactive, and they all of their waste, what is truly waste when you separate it out, fits in a room about this size. And that's one of the things that my company is working on, is on recycling the fuel. It's very recyclable. You can separate out the stuff that is highly radioactive. And while that it does have some uses, we would call it primarily waste. But most of it is not waste, and it's a small amount. And actually, I think this is one of the strengths of nuclear power. When you talk about all the other sources of getting energy, if you look at burning coal, coal emits more radioactive elements because they're just in the ground when you burn coal, and that goes right into the atmosphere, unlike nuclear power that contains it. When you look at wind turbines, we don't actually currently have a good solution for turbine blades. So those are also a waste stream that we need to account for. Anyway, I'm not here to pontificate, but I did want to address that because it's been brought up a few times. So sadly, it's more of a political problem of what to do with nuclear waste.
Hey everybody, I wanted to bring it back a little more local. Yesterday when I was walking down State Street, I noticed that almost all of the clothing stores on State Street are now thrift stores, which I kind of took note of the fact that that means that college students likely are wanting to shop at thrift stores. I think it's a great thing for our consumerism complement. So I wondered, things like that, what can we do in the 2 or 3 mile radius of this location that, Lisa gave a great example, Stockton and Saltdown, what do you guys see as examples for our neighborhood that we can take action on? I'm standing next to a heat pump back there, that's a great one, what else?
You want to respond? Well, I'll let the panelists respond first.
Yeah, first.
Yeah, I would say thrifting is a great solution. There's a lot of individual action I think people can take that are good, but then not enough. And so I would say there's a couple pitfalls with individual action, and the first is convincing yourself that that's enough, because it's not. It is part of a bigger solution, a very important part. And then the second is sort of the idea of greenwashing. So on State Street, one of the shops there is Ragstock, and they purport to have a lot of thrifted stuff, but they also mass produce really cheap goods in a not sustainable way. So I think it's just something to watch out for. But actual individual actions you can take, I would say one of the most powerful things is your diet, because you eat 3 times a day, and so meat has a ginormous impact. I don't know if this is inspiring, but I was one of the people who became a vegetarian in the 3rd grade because I decided I didn't want to kill the animals that I saw, or take life like that. And then during the pandemic, I kind of had more time to delve into like the research on climate change and things like that, and I started looking at how diet really is like one of the most important factors that you can look at. And so I also get a chance to have vegan, so I've been vegan since 7th grade, 6th grade, somewhere around there. And then I would say another thing that's not strictly a physical action, but it's still super important, is just talking to the people around you. I think Madison is such a bubble that we assume that everyone has the same information we do and the same ideas as we do, and that's sometimes true, but that doesn't mean that we can just like walk around in our own little bubbles and never talk about it, because even if we have the same ideas, talking about them is how we implement the solutions and take them from just complaints we have in our heads to solutions for a brighter future.
Madeline is amazing. And that's a great answer, and I agree with a lot of what you said. And our organization really is about collective action. So how we influence decisions that are made by leaders and businesses. But we know that a big part of action on climate is what you can do yourself. And I would just, in addition to mentioning diet, also think about plastic use, because we know that fossil fuel companies, as they are going to be, they're not facing as much resistance now, but they're trying to get us to use plastics because that is made from hydrocarbons. So definitely I would say think about how to limit plastic use in your life. Turn your thermostat down, take alternate forms of transportation. All of that is, of course, also really important. But I would say find ways to join with other people and make your voice heard. It's probably the most important thing that you can do.
Yeah, I agree with all those things. Also, we can really talk about biodiversity is kind of, climate change is one of the big impacts on biodiversity. It's like a global crisis we're having. And we've just gained a lot of knowledge about the benefits of native plants for a lot of the biodiversity that exists in our systems, especially climate change. The more we can, if you have the ability to plant things, if you have ER, if you have a neighborhood association, to use native plants in place of introduced horticultural varieties can really benefit local biodiversity. There's obviously all the local things you can do, from your consumption patterns to your driving patterns. From eating meat, a great analysis came out last year that shows Madeline's vegan, which is great. A lot of people go that direction and become vegetarian. It's hard to get people off meat if they just don't want to do that. And then that study is a great study to show the policy directive, if they're going to have policies on reducing meat consumption, pushing towards having people eat half as much meat as they currently eat is a realistic policy goal that can actually have a big impact. Obviously if we have a policy, no one can eat meat anymore, that wouldn't work, right? But if you can get people to reduce their meat consumption, that's a really good benefit, and I think it's feasible as well. And the plastic thing, we all want our organic lettuce, and it's in a plastic container. And so it's just the amount of, just seeing the increase in the amount of plastic in the recycling bin, since they've put plastics, everything in plastic. So I agree that there's ways to get around as much plastic consumption, and I think that's a really good way to reduce impacts as well.
And I just wanted to add, Patrick brought up a really good point that it's much more important to reduce your impact than to be perfect about it. So buying fewer things is much better than attempting to buy nothing at all and then ending up like I stockpiling all your impulse control and it all comes down all at once. Or eating meat 2 times a week instead of every day is much better than eating every day. So just doing what you can and not being perfectionist about it, I think it's much more realistic for a lot of people, and it's still quite important.
You still want to make a comment?
Okay. Yeah, I just got excited.
Use the microphone.
When you asked that question, I got excited because I was thinking in terms of like a neighborhood, what can you do? And I think something like composting is really, habit-forming practice. And if a neighborhood
had a space somewhere in it where they could do composting, I think it would really encourage people to compost, and it would be a lot less expensive if that's an issue, which I think it is an issue for people, because they do have compost companies that come and pick it up and give you an, but if there was a local spot where you could drop off your compost, I think that would get a lot more people involved in that practice. Or to encourage, if there was some sort of group that encouraged or helped people put a compost in their yard, if they have a yard and they're kind of confused or just need a push to do it.
Great.
I would just say there is a city composting program. I think that they have pickup or drop-off sites. I think associated with the farmers market, I'm not sure, but you could definitely look into that. I know they've been doing some studies to try and figure out how to expand it. Yeah, great idea.
I think I saw something, but then I'll come back to you. Did you still want to say something?
She said what? There are ways to get composted already available. You just look it up on the city site. And there are some bins, and there are bins in various parts close to us. So I think if you just start doing a little research, you can find where you can take it. There's that service that comes around and picks it up. I've seen the buckets sitting out. They're small buckets.
Green box is one.
Yeah. The university has some limited slots. It has food composting for students. So there are ways to do it. If we try and find a site in the neighborhood, the question is who's going to maintain it. You have to turn it over. You have to keep the junk out of it. It'll draw animals if it's not protected the right way. So there are ways to do it. There are ways that are already available, but good point. It's a good habit.
Great.
Hi, it's Cyber. I have to say I have very little hope on the climate change. But one thing that would give me hope would be if a city like Madison, which is filled with really intelligent people, very progressive, they all understand what's going on around them. But if they could collectively have some kind of action, recycling was, or composting is just one example. But if a city the size of Madison could actually say, we as a city understand what's happening to the world, and we're actually going to do something about plastics, something really profound about plastics, or something about changing our diet, but do it collectively. And we seem to all be living in the same bubble, so you would think we could somehow reach a consensus about this. But it doesn't seem to be happening. I wonder if you have any vision for how something like this could really motivate and get people to understand that communities actually can do powerful things.
Yeah, I mean, I do think the city is less about trying to get people to change those kinds of personal behaviors, but the city is doing a fair amount. Like I would point to their efficiency navigator. They are, paying to upgrade affordable housing to be more energy efficient. I think the BRT system is a good example. They're doing a lot of, they've been recently doing a lot of air quality monitoring to help community members understand, how their health is being impacted by fossil fuels. The city does also lead by example. They've done a lot to get their energy from sustainable sources. So I guess, I'm not necessarily, it's not like my job to, promote the city, but I do think that there's quite a lot that they've been doing. The 2024 Sustainability Plan update, I think identifies a lot of different goals and policies that the city has to keep doing more. So, but I think all of us can pressure the city. You can bring your ideas to the city, you can show up if you don't think they're doing enough, and suggest what you'd like to see, because there definitely are avenues to do that. But I would say, like, my experience also working with city staff, they're pretty awesome. So.
I think it sounds like you have a powerful vision for the future, and I think the reason that hasn't been realized is because all of the people who have that powerful vision sit there and think to themselves, why aren't things better? So I would encourage you to, like Stephanie was saying, reach out to the city. They're typically very responsive. I don't know if it's just because I'm a youth, but I've heard back from not only the city, but also like Congress members that I've written to. So I would say that's a good starting place. And then just piggybacking also on what Stephanie was saying, I do think there's some powerful things that the city has already been doing. The recent referendums that were passed for the school construction have given us the budget to make our schools much more sustainable. And we actually had Mayor Sandy Rhodes come in to visit our green club last year, I believe, and she talked about some of the climate policies that the city is implementing right now. So that was really cool to hear as well.
Yeah, I don't really know much about the local politics. I've just arrived here, but local policies are obviously very important. Cities do have to do things like I talked about earlier. They have to deal with stormwater infrastructure. That's very expensive. They have to make changes, and they are looking forward, I know, to what's coming and the changes they are experiencing. Some of that's kind of reactive. So I guess when things start to affect people's public safety and health, which are like main things the city does, the more it's felt. Energy infrastructure, can become more of an issue in 20 years for the city's doing more than it's doing. So again, I don't know enough about it. My impression is they're doing more than a lot of cities I've been part of, and they always have budgetary constraints and those kinds of things. So I'm certainly looking forward to finding out more about what they're doing, but they are a very key part of that collective action that has to take place. It's the local politics, local government.
I do know that they updated their stormwater management ordinance just a couple of years ago because we were involved with that, and passed an energy and EV infrastructure ordinance to try to make it easier for like new construction to incorporate, to be EV ready. And the city is also part of the Wisconsin Local Government Climate Coalition, which just keeps growing. And they're all the cities who have passed, 100% clean energy ordinances and are working together to try to, improve what cities can do across Wisconsin. So I know the cities are also talking with each other and, trying to pressure the Public Service Commission together, sort of using their collective power also to have better policies in our state. One of the things that's really critical actually is that in Wisconsin our building and energy codes are really out of date. And the legislature has refused to update them and make so that buildings would be more energy efficient. And they've also gone so far as to prevent local government from having any policies or codes that are more stringent than the state. So they're tying local government hands and refusing to do anything themselves. And this is an ongoing fight for a number of years that lots of environmental organizations have been part of. So some of it comes back to we need to get better leaders in the legislature so we can unstick some of this stuff, and then local government would be able to do more.
I saw your hand up first.
I just want to mention two things. I think we all received how to recycle properly postcard recently. And I think what I hear is that a huge amount of what we put in those trash cans are not usable because we don't do it right. And so again, if we could publicize that in the newsletter and make sure that people are really making the effort to clean their stuff before they put it in the recycle bin, that might help at least get some of that into the recycling system instead of the landfill. The other thing is that our committee at one point talked about making Monroe Street a plastic straw, free zone or something, and then the pandemic hit. So, if we could work with some of our restaurants, we've got lots of good restaurants, those take-home containers, some of them are going to compostable ones, But little things like that, if we could become famous on Monroe Street for being plastic free, we could set an example for the rest of the city. So just a thought.
Yeah, I was just wondering what you think about advice for homeowners for obviously making we need to make our homes as energy efficient as possible, but how important is it, do you think, that we switch to solar, you know, as individual homeowners?
I mean, I think it's a great, important step to take if you can afford it. You know, with the IRA rebates and all that in question, it may become more difficult. I would say there's two resources I would suggest you look at for that. One is the state's Focus on Energy program. The state was really like the first one to get some of the federal money like out and available. And then also the Dane County Office of Climate and Clean Energy, I probably said that wrong, but you can find it, has a great website with a lot of guidance on what homeowners can do and how to take advantage of some of the new funding that's available, at least for now.
A couple thoughts. One on recycling and another on solar energy. Solar energy first. Is there a way that we can orient our utility to subsidize solar panels on our roofs such that we get X number of panels, 25% of which go to us, some goes into a battery, and we could become part of a grid when needed. So that orientation may entice MG&E, for instance, to take an interest in doing it. I'm seeing from a reaction that this is not a good thought. The other thing on recycling is, I don't know, this is complete ignorance on my part, are we, when we put things in the landfill, since it's obvious we're not serious about recycling, or we wouldn't have so much plastic, which speaks to a whole set of political ideologies and the convenience of fossil fuels, etc. But can we put in this city all the plastics in one part, everything we can't recycle now, or everything is like another thing? Because I'm pretty sure in the future we'll probably build a giant solar furnace and blast everything back in and extract everything from that landfill to reuse it again someday when it's convenient and the price goes up. So two thoughts. One is infrastructure for solar panels, all of us becoming part of a grid, and the other is if we don't know what to do to recycle it, can we at least separate things so that in the future, if something like a giant solar furnace comes along, like the one at MMoCA, we could separate and split everything back to useful things much like